Hi, welcome to Czech Globe. Today we'll talk about the recent climate change report and why 1.5 degrees Celsius is a magical number. Let's begin. Okay, so it seems like the climate change is quite a big important problem, and many states are now trying to deal with it, and there are specific climate goals, and one just talked about the most, especially by IPCC and other organizations, 1.5 degrees. And then there are some other goals. Could you tell something more about this?
Yeah, so, well, IPCC, I guess most people already know, it's an Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's the most authoritative body, scientific body that brings up-to-date knowledge about climate science in general, from physical science basis up to social sciences and economic sciences and mitigation. It's not a prescription for politicians what to do. It's a recommendation what should be done, or even more precisely, if we do this, then this happens, right? So IPCC is basically results or tells the results of climate research. It is special in a way that it's basically global institutions. There is a lot of scientists involved, hundreds of scientists. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of reports. The first report was released already in the 90s, so it's more than 30 years ago. And since then, basically, it says the same thing, right? The IPCC says that in order to stop warming, anthropogenic warming, we need to stop carbon emissions, carbon input into the atmosphere. There is no other way to stop climate change. So what IPCC says is that if we want to stop global warming, say at 1.5 degree Celsius compared to pre-industrial temperature, then we need to reduce our carbon emission very rapidly in a matter of decades. Why 1.5? The other target is 2 degrees. So we often say 1.5 to 2 degrees, these two limits. Why? When there was this question, what is the dangerous limit of global warming, right? Because we didn't have this knowledge like forever. There was ongoing research about it. So scientists looked at what could be considered as dangerous by means of warming levels compared again to the pre-industrial that we consider sort of reference level when the warming started, basically, at the beginning of Industrial Revolution. And that's considered also the temperature level that we are as a society adapted to that level of warming, right? So that's why we always talk about temperature increase compared to pre-industrial temperature. And then we have these two limits, 1.5 to 2 degrees. So when we didn't know what's the level, scientists looked at some key stabilizing biomes or structures on the planet, in the biosphere. And at the time, it was around beginning of the millennia, sometimes after the year 2000. And the result of this conference that was dealing with defining the dangerous level of warming, the scientists found out that if we keep warming below 2 degrees, then the key elements of climate system, including Greenland ice sheet, should be kept intact or damaged very lightly. That was the reason that people were talking about these 2 degrees, that we should keep the things impacted or influenced by warming, but not to a degree that it would endanger the current state of society, of globalized civilization. Well, that was like 15 to 20 years ago. So, and as the knowledge progressed, not only in relation to the Greenland ice sheet and other components of climate system like Amazon forest, I don't know, thermohaline circulation that people know as the Gulf Stream, for instance, or boreal forests and so on, permafrost melting, Arctic ice. So all these important and interrelated components of climate system, and as we knew more about them, then people started to say maybe 2 degrees is too much for keeping the climate safe again for humans, more or less. That's why the consensus arrived at the better limit for if we talk about safe climate is not actually 2 degrees, but even less, 1.5 degree level of warming. That doesn't mean that we change our temperature projections for the future, because they were more or less the same over the last, 30, 40 years. So this kind of prediction we had quite consistent over the decades. So that didn't change. We know how much it will warm based on how much CO2 we put in the atmosphere. But the knowledge, what it will cause to the planet, has changed quite, and it's still changing, right? We still get new data, new studies, new observations, and now people say 1.5 would mean that, or crossing the 1.5 would put a very high risk for a lot of places on the planet and on a lot of people. So crossing 1.5 would be considered, or by climate scientists is now considered as really having a huge impact. And then, again, it doesn't mean that even current warming, which is more than 1 degree already, isn't causing huge damages. It already is, but people think, or we think, that if we don't cross this 1.5, or if we don't cross the temperature for a longer period of time, because it seems we cannot stop it, we can't stop warming at 1.5, then we should go back below this, we call it like overshoot, like temperature overshoot, but then the temperature would decline. So in that case, we should be able to keep most of the services that we have today. That's the idea behind 1.5 and 2 degrees.